What is our threat perception? What is it? What exactly are we banning? And can we actually trace the supply chain to a level that we know right down to the nanometer level of a chip, whether this component is supplied by the Chinese or some other country? We don't. The weapon has a certain end game. It has a certain goal or a certain mechanism which is manifested. Would these systems provide unfair leverage to some parties? Well, that is the case with almost every technological framework, yes, and certainly the way Chinese have aggregated their data, it would be foolish to deny the fact that there's a geopolitical angle to the rise of Chinese technological companies. But then that itself is a global phenomenon. You must understand that the internet has always been shaped by underlying strong political undercurrents. Can we actually trace the supply chain to a level that we know right down to the nanometer level of a chip, whether this component is supplied by the Chinese or some other country? We don't. So again, this is slightly ham-fisted. There's a threat perception. Your data would get misutilized. And the thing is that, generally the surveillance, this intrusive adversarial surveillance against other nation states, it works in two ways. One way it works is that you create structures of access. I mean, just like Chinese did, or even the Americans did. The second is, you undertake expeditionary maneuvers. You take cyber operations, offensive cyber operations. So, I mean, China's offensive cyber capabilities are so matured that they could always compensate these access-based mechanism with offensive cyber operations. The thing is, there needs to be some nuance to it. Is a threat perception that the videos of teenagers are going out to other countries? Such maneuver has to be backed by a solid intelligence program. Do we have that? When the Americans started their trade war against Huawei, it was backed by intelligence which was gathered over years. Do we have the structures in place so that we know what we're doing and what our decisions, how they impact the larger scheme of things? It's actually a very complex technological problem, which it's challenging to explain it in this context. As Mike Walker, he's a renowned scientist from DARPA. He mentioned once that I cannot help but sort of accept the fact or acknowledge the fact that all cyber technologies are dual use. Your antivirus actually uses the same intrusive mechanisms to surveil your system, just what a malware does. And this duality of information, especially in cybersecurity, can go to any extent. Your encryption mechanism itself could provide civil liberties, but can also be used by terrorists. And so this duality of information, it exists at every level. So the way we cybersecurity professionals, we evaluate the security of a platform is by trying to hack into it. So the demarcation does not really exist for us. In fact, even under the underlying security tools, they themselves utilize offensive mechanisms to surveil for defensive purposes, and vice versa. If you undertake an offensive cyber operation, it could be actually a preemptive measure taken for a defense, because let's say you want to defend against an adversary, you'll have to have established presence on the network so that you're able to respond at a place and time of choosing. Such databases, they do amplify the surveillance capabilities of a nation state or adversarial nation states. But then banning them would also create or encourage local, similar such applications, which could be prone to misuse. So it's a very complicated sort of discussion, but it's difficult to explain that in this context.